Okay, so we live in this world just absolutely drowning in information, right? And finding the actual signal, the stuff that matters, can feel, well, impossible sometimes.
It really can.
You need that shortcut, that way to get genuinely well-informed without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly.
So today, we're doing one of our deep dives. We're looking at a really critical section of the official SAT study guide, Chapter 18.
Passport to Advanced Math.
That's the one. Our mission, like always, is to pull out the most important nuggets. We're talking skills, strategies, official tips, everything straight from the source.
Good plan.
We want to make sure you're ready to tackle these questions with, real confidence.
And it definitely deserves that kind of deep dive. This section, Passport to Advanced Math, it's not just like another chapter.
Yeah.
No. It accounts for a huge chunk of the test. We're talking 16 questions out of the 58 on the SAT math test.
16? Wow, that's, what, nearly 30%?
Pretty close, but 28%, yeah.
Yeah.
All focused on these specific advanced concepts.
So it's not just calculation, then?
Not at all. It demands more.
Yeah.
It really requires a deeper understanding of mathematical structures, how they work, and how they apply in the real world.
Okay.
It's where those foundational algebra skills you've built really start to, perform.
So if it's that significant, let's define it. What exactly is Passport to Advanced Math? What are the core topics, the skills it's really testing?
Right. So fundamentally, it builds on that algebra foundation. It pushes you to analyze, manipulate, and rewrite expressions and functions that are, frankly, more complex.
Okay.
The core areas. Well, first, you need mastery of linear stuff equations, systems of equations, linear functions. That's the bedrock. Can't skip that.
Foundational. Got it.
Then it gets into procedural skills, adding, subtracting, multiplying polynomials, and crucially, factoring. Being able to factor well can unlock some really complicated-looking expressions. You'll also see expressions with integer and rational exponents, radicals, fractions with variables down to the denominator. Tricky stuff sometimes.
Yeah, those denominators can trip you up.
Definitely. And then there's solving equations.
Yeah.
Lots of equation solving. Quadratics, rational equations, even nonlinear ones.
Okay.
Plus, manipulating equations that have several variables, maybe to isolate just one specific quantity they're asking about.
Right, rearranging formulas.
Exactly. And finally, a big one, understanding quadratic and exponential functions. Not just the equations, but their graphs, what they look like, and what they mean in a specific context. It's about seeing the sort of hidden architecture of the math.
That is a pretty wide range of advanced concepts. Are there specific characteristics of these questions? Like, besides the content, do they show up in particular parts of the test or maybe look different?
Yes, absolutely. Good question. They mix it up. You'll see both multiple choice questions and the student-produced response ones, the grid-ins.
Okay, so need to be ready for both formats.
Right. And importantly, some of these questions are in the no calculator section, while others are in the calculator section. So knowing when to use your calculator and how to use it strategically, that becomes a skill in itself. It's not just about crunching numbers, it's smart tool use.
That makes sense. Calculator strategy is key.
Totally. And the College Board actually gives this section its own subscore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, reported on a scale of 1 to 15. That kind of signals how distinct and important its focus is within the whole math section.
Okay, so we've mapped out the what. Let's get into the how. The guide starts with operations with polynomials and rewriting expressions. Seems foundational.
It is.
What should you really focus on here to get this down?
Yeah, this part is mostly testing your ability to manipulate expressions, simplify them.
Okay.
So strong procedural skill is essential. Things like distributing, combining like terms, factoring polynomials. You need to be smooth with those.
Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And the SAT often requires you to spot patterns to rewrite complex expressions quickly. It's about efficiency.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The guide has a good one, page 228. It shows how you might find the value of a constant, let's call it b, in an expanded polynomial, something like x plus bx2, x plus 3.
Okay.
You basically expand it out and then compare the coefficients of your result to the target polynomial they give you. It's like being a math detective.
Lining things up. I like that.
Yeah.
So recognizing the structure, that underlying pattern, seems really critical for saving time.
Huge. It's not just about grinding through algebra.
What other kinds of algebraic gymnastics are expected here?
Well, sometimes the key is just recognizing a common algebraic identity.
Ah, like difference of squares.
Exactly. Page 229 in the guide has an example like rewriting 16's 4,4T2. If you spot that difference of two squares pattern, you can factor it super quickly.
Right. 4s2, 2t, 4s2 plus 2t, much faster.
Much faster. It's about leveraging those known identities. The guide also touches on scenarios like finding a constant c if you know one polynomial is divisible by another.
How does that work?
Often, the trick is to set the divisor, like y2 equal to 0, find the value of y, so y2 here, and then substitute that back into the bigger polynomial. That's also on page 229.
Okay, clever shortcuts. Now, this is where I think things get really interesting for a lot of students. Quadratic functions and equations.
Vivid one.
Quadratics are just everywhere in advanced math, but they seem to, intimidate people. What's the biggest hurdle, you think? And how does the guide help?
That's a great point. Quadratics are fundamental. I think the hurdle is often seeing them as this one single scary problem type.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing them as like a set of challenges where different tools work best for different situations. The chapter really emphasizes knowing various methods to solve them and understanding their applications in real-world problems.
So multiple tools in the toolbox.
Exactly. The guide highlights 4 main ways. Factoring, which is often fastest if it works.
Right.
Completing the square, which is powerful but sometimes cumbersome. Using the quadratic formula. The reliable workhorse.
The fallback plan.
Definitely. Or sometimes just using your calculator effectively. The key is picking the right tool for the specific equation you're facing.
Makes sense. Does the guide show this in action?
Oh yeah. Example 4, page 230, it's a great real-world problem about a car's travel distance in a red light. It leads you straight to a quadratic equation by 2 plus 48 by 3960 with 0 that you then need to solve within that story's context.
Okay, connecting math to reality.
Exactly. And for those equations that just don't factor nicely, example 5, page 231, walks you right through using the quadratic formula.
X, nevis b b2, 4ac, 2a. Gotta know that one.
You really do. It's your ultimate safety net. It works for any quadratic, no matter how messy the numbers get.
That's comforting to know there's always a way. What about more conceptual quadratic problems, not just finding x?
Right. Well, the formula is the safety net. Sometimes factoring is just, well, cleaner and faster if you spot it. Example 6, also page 231, shows factoring 2 by 2 plus 3 plus 3 by 2 equals 0 into 2 by 1, x plus 2. Quick and elegant.
If you see it.
If you see it. And then, for a really cool insight, example 7, still on 231, asks for the sum of the solutions to an equation like 2 by 1, 2 equals x plus 2, 2.
Oh, interesting. Do you have to find both solutions first?
You could, but the shortcut, the deeper understanding, is knowing that for any quadratic x2 plus bx plus c0, the sum of the solutions is always just mebe.
So you don't even need the solutions themselves.
Exactly. Even if you're stuck or short on time, you can figure out the sum without finding the individual roots. That shows a real grasp of how quadratics behave. It's a powerful little piece of knowledge.
That is a superpower. Okay, let's shift gears. Exponential functions, equations, and radicals. This often brings in real-world growth and decay, right?
Yeah, this section definitely tests your comfort with exponent rules and how quantities change over time, often dramatically.
So things like compound interest or population growth.
Precisely. You need to understand how to set up and interpret those exponential growth models, like P1 plus RT or decay models. Example 8 on page 232 uses a city's population growing at a certain annual rate. You have to pick the right expression. It shows how even a small percentage rate adds up significantly over time.
And what about actually manipulating the expressions, especially with those tricky fractional or negative exponents?
Good question. Yeah, the questions will definitely push you to rewrite expressions using exponent and radical properties. Example 9, page 233, might ask you to simplify something like -1x12.
Okay, connecting fractions and exponents to roots.
Exactly. It tests that relationship and also how negative exponents work, flipping the base. But this section also introduces a really critical warning.
Which is?
Extraneous solutions.
The fake answers.
The fake answers. Example 10, also on 233, deals with solving a radical equation, like by 12 squared x plus 44. When you solve this, you usually have to square both sides. And that step, squaring both sides, can sometimes create solutions that work in your new equation, but not in the original one.
So you have to plug them back in.
You absolutely have to plug them back into the original equation. Always, always check. It's a classic SAT trap.
That is such a crucial practical tip for test day. Okay, how about solving rational equations? You know, when I first saw variables in the denominator, my brain just tied itself in knots.
You're not alone. They look intimidating.
What's the secret to making them less scary?
The secret is recognizing the trap door before you fall in. Those variables in the denominator mean certain values of x are forbidden, right? Because you can't divide by 0.
Right. Need to identify those first.
Yes. Before you even start solving, figure out which values would make any denominator 0. Keep those in mind. Ignoring them is how you get extraneous solutions here, too.
Okay, so identify the excluded values, then what?
Then, the main strategy, usually the best one, is to eliminate the denominators altogether. Multiply every single term in the equation, or inequality, by the least common multiple of all the denominators.
Yeah.
That clears the fractions. Example 11 on page 234 shows this with an inequality like 310 plus 1 plus 2t plus 312. It takes careful algebra, and you still have to remember those initial excluded values for t.
Okay, clear the fractions, watch out for forbidden values. Got it. Let's link this now to systems of equations. We're moving beyond just two simple lines crossing, aren't we?
We are. The stakes get higher here. This chapter really gets into systems that mix things up, maybe one linear equation and one quadratic equation.
Like a line crossing a parabola.
Exactly like that. And what's cool is that the algebraic solutions you find correspond directly to the points where those graphs intersect.
The visual connection again.
Right. Example 12, page 234, shows solving a system like that, maybe using substitution. It gives you 3x plus y equals 3, x plus 126 equals y.
Look.
Solving it algebraically gives you the exact xy coordinates where the line and the parabola meet.
That's a neat connection. Which leads us perfectly into the next bit. Relationships between algebraic and graphical representations of functions. This feels like the really visual part of advanced math.
It absolutely is. It's all about bridging that gap between the symbols on the page, the equation, and the picture it creates, the graph.
So what key things do you need to understand from a graph?
Several key things. You need to interpret x-intercepts, where the graph crosses the x-axis. These are also called the zeros, or roots, of the function.
Okay.
Y-intercepts, where it crosses the axis. The domain, that's all the possible x values you can plug into the function.
T inputs.
Right. And the range, all the possible I values the function can spit out.
The outputs.
Exactly. Also, maximum or minimum points where the graph reaches a peak or a valley. Intervals where the function is increasing or decreasing as you move from left to right. And end behavior.
End behavior? What's that?
It's like, what happens to the graph way out on the edges? As x gets really, really big, either positive or negative, does the graph shoot up towards infinity, dive down, or maybe level off at a certain height?
Okay. The long-term trend. And transformations are a big part of this too, right? Shifting graphs around.
Huge. You need to know how simple changes to the function's formula affect the graph. Like adding a constant outside the function, fx plus a, shifts it up or down.
Vertical shift.
Right. And adding a constant inside the parentheses, fx plus a, shifts it left or right. It's often the opposite direction you'd first guess.
Horizontal shift. Got it. Any SAT-specific conventions for graphs?
Yeah, the guide points out on page 236, SAT graphs usually have axes that are perpendicular. They use linear scales, meaning the tick marks are evenly spaced. And unless they tell you otherwise, assume the units on the x-axis and y-axis are the same size.
Good practical notes.
Oh.
Does the guide give examples of connecting graphs in algebra here?
Definitely. Example 13 shows how knowing the x-intercepts helps you identify the function. If a graph hits the x-axis at nebis 4 and 5, the function likely involves factors like x plus 4 and x5, or maybe x4, x plus 5. Wait, no, signs flip. Intercepted nebis 4 means factor x plus 4. Intercepted 5 means factor x of 5, so like fx plus 4 by 5.
Okay, roots to factors, that's key.
Very key. Another great one is example 14 on page 237. It asks you to find a constant k so that an equation like fx by 2, 2.4 by 2 post k if k has, say, exactly two solutions.
How does that connect to the graph?
Well, setting the function equal to k is like drawing a horizontal line y equals k. The number of solutions is just the number of times that horizontal line crosses the graph of fx.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant way to visualize solutions.
That is clever, visualizing algebra.
Exactly. And one more here. Example 15 on page 237 tests function notation, including composite functions, like find in gf2 if you're given the rules for fx and gx. Just reinforces making sure you plug things in correctly, inside out.
Okay, function mechanics. All right, final big topic. Interpreting and analyzing more complex equations in context. This sounds like where everything we've discussed gets applied to those SAT word problems.
Precisely. This is where you have to put it all together. Synthesize information from a scenario. Figure out the quantitative relationships, maybe build an equation yourself, or analyze one they give you.
And the answer isn't just a number.
Right. It's an interpretation. You have to connect the math back to what it means in the context of the problem.
Examples.
Sure. Example 16, page 238, might talk about a reservoir's water level over time, described by a function ft. It might ask what F37D means.
Okay, so maybe on day 37, the reservoir is at 70% capacity.
Exactly that kind of interpretation, connecting the function value to the real-world meaning.
And the SAT isn't afraid to pull in formulas from, like, science class?
Not at all. Example 17, page 238, uses the kinetic energy formula KE equals 12 mV2. It might ask how KE changes if you double the velocity v.
Well, since v is squared, doubling it would make KE 4 times bigger.
Perfect. That's the kind of analysis needed, understanding how variables impact each other. They might even throw in something like Graham's law from chemistry, like at example 18 on page 239. It involves radicals. It requires careful algebraic manipulation to solve for one variable in terms of others. Shows you need to be comfortable with complex formulas wherever they come from.
Wow. Okay. So be ready for anything.
Yeah.
Is there a final example that really drives home the practical power of understanding equation form?
Yes, one more, and it's a fantastic one for understanding structure. Example 19, page 239, looks at a store's revenue function. It might be given in vertex form, like R-4, P25-2, plus 2500.
Okay, vertex form of a parabola.
Right. And the beauty of vertex form, which the SAT loves, is that it tells you the key information immediately, without calculation.
How so?
Because it's AXH2 plus K, the vertex is right there at AHK, in this case, 2500. And since the leading coefficient matus 4 is negative, the parabola opens downward.
Meaning it has a maximum point.
Exactly. So that vertex, 2500, tells you the maximum revenue is 2500, and it occurs when the price P is 25. You just read it off the equation. No complex solving needed.
That's incredibly efficient. Seeing the answer in the structure itself.
That's the power of understanding form. It's a huge advantage.
Okay, so we've covered a massive amount of ground here. After exploring all this, what does it really boil down to for you, the listener, preparing for the SAT? What are the absolute must-know takeaways, the practical advice for nailing Passport to Advanced Math?
Right, let's synthesize. Beyond just doing practice problems, remember these core strategies straight from the guide itself. 1. Foundation first. Page 228 explicitly says this section builds on heart of algebra. So make sure those basics are rock solid. Don't skip ahead.
Solid advice. What's next?
2. Efficiency in rewriting. Get good at spotting patterns like difference of squares or factoring quickly. Speed matters.
Recognize those shortcuts.
3. Strategic problem solving. Especially with quadratics, know when to use which tool. Factoring. Formula. Calculator. Choose the most efficient path for that specific problem. Don't just default to one method.
Smart strategy.
4. Check your solutions. I know we said it before, but it's vital. Especially for radical and rational equations, avoid those extraneous solution traps. Plug your answers back into the original equation.
Critical check step.
5. Contextual understanding. Always relate your math back to the story. What does this variable actually represent in the real-world scenario?
Don't lose sight of the meaning.
And finally, 6. Graphical interpretation. Really understand how the algebra translates to the visual graph, and vice versa. How do changes in the equation shift or stretch the picture?
Connect the equation and the image.
That's the core toolkit right there.
Wow. We have really, truly explored the entire landscape of Passport to Advanced Math from the official SAT study guide. I feel like we've hit every skill, strategy, type of question, example, and tip in there. Hopefully you feel much more ready to tackle this big piece of the SAT math test.
Yeah, I think we've unpacked the complexities, looked at solid examples, and pulled out those key insights from the guide.
Yeah.
It's really clear that understanding why the math works and how it applies in different situations is just as crucial as knowing the steps to solve it.
It's about intuition, not just memorization.
Exactly, building that mathematical intuition.
So as you continue your prep, what's the big idea to keep in mind? For me, it keeps coming back to what you said about recognizing the form of an equation, how that structure itself can tell you so much about how it behaves even before you calculate anything. That feels like a real superpower for problem solving, doesn't it? A strategic edge beyond just crunching the numbers, something to really think about.
It's definitely something to think about. It changes how you approach the problems.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into SAT math. Keep practicing, keep exploring those connections, and keep learning.